Hello, welcome back. We are doing section by section of the Hyperautomation Practice Exam. And we are now in section 3. Now, this objective is design, build, manage RPA processes using hyperautomation. So this is going to drill down further into RPA. All right, so here we go. Let's go into during an evaluation of the candidate RPA process, which key qualifiers should be considered? Okay, these are in the evaluation phase. So during an evaluation, there are the matrix. There's the qualifiers and the benefits. Okay. So an employee of the airlines regularly performs a manual process to extract customer and flight information from multiple legacy systems. Any airlines recently purchased Meals of Automation, and they hope to automate this manual process using RPA. During the evaluation of the candidate RPA process, what key qualifiers should be considered? Okay, key qualifier. That is important. That is important. So what you want to do in your trailhead study area, there are the trails that I've given you as a reference to go and look at what are actually in the key qualifier categories versus the benefits. So that's where it's important to know what those qualifiers are versus what the benefits are. So in the group of answers, is the process performed regularly? Is not going to matter. The process performed regularly is really actually included. There is a question in the cost analysis of how frequent is this process performed? Does the process interact with multiple legacy systems? That is not part of a qualifier. The legacy, that's not going to be part of that at all. Is the process error prone? Again, that's not going to be considered in this case. But what is to be considered in this case is the process stable? Okay, is the process stable? And so the answer for this one would be found in looking at the details of the qualifiers versus the benefits. And the correct answer is A in this case. Okay, so as I mentioned, you will need to review some of the details in the stage of the evaluation phase of the process. Okay, number 21, which task is performed in the evaluation phase of the RPA process? Design a BPMN of business process automation. Nope, that's not done in evaluation. Set up the hardware and software for the bots. That is not done in the evaluation phase. Build the workflow. Nope, that is not either. What we're doing in the evaluation phase is to determine if that process qualifies for automation. And if you remember how that matrix looked, there was the red, yellow, green area, and depending upon what you answered in the qualifiers or the benefits would determine where that ended up. Okay, so it's to determine if it qualifies for automation. All right, this one, which MuleSoft RPA component is used at each stage of the RPA lifecycle? All right, so on this one, each stage of the lifecycle of the RPA process. Builder is only used in the build phase. Recorder is only used in the design and build phase. Bot instance is actually in the test and production phase. So RPA Manager is used at each stage of the RPA lifecycle, according to them, where they say that is going to be part of interacting with RPA Manager. Okay, so all of them would be RPA Manager. Next up is, according to best practices, how should the email address be passed from RPA Manager into an RPA process? Okay, so Northern Trail Outfitters is creating multiple RPA processes that send an email notification to sales@nto.com. They want to avoid hard coding the email in case the email changes in the future. Okay, so how can we, or how should we, how should that email be passed from RPA manager to an RPA process, right? And so the options are create an environment variable and set it to the email address. That's kind of, an environment variable. Declare a process variable and set it to the email process. All right. Set the email address in the parameter file and reference it in the RPA process, or declare a global variable and set it to the email address. All right. So essentially the global variable is the answer. And that does make sense that it would be the global variable. If you remember, we set the activity parameters, and that's where a value would come in as a global variable. And we use those values. In our case, it was mostly our output values, but that is where you would have that declared as a global variable and set it to the email address. Okay, oops. There you go. All right, number 24. Okay, so which data structures inside of the RPA process should they use for receiving the inbound data and returning the outbound data? Okay, so which data structures inside the RPA process use receiving inbound and returning outbound? All right, so NTO wants to extract data from files that contain handwritten text. They plan to create an RPA process that can be invoked from both Mule applications developed with Anypoint Platform and Composer. They also want to be able to specify which file to process based on information passed into the RPA process from the calling application. Okay, they want to be able to tell them which file to process depending upon what was sent in, and passes the data extracted from the file back to the calling application. All right, so in deciphering everything here, we know that this information needs to be invoked from Mule Apps and Composer. We want to determine based on the information passed which file to process. So we need to do something input and output based on this. Do you see it? We need something input and output. And RPA, they are considered to be the activity parameters. We set those activity parameters and use those throughout the RPA bot process of building it. And so all of these are not correct based on the way they're worded. Inbound parameter, outbound parameter, inbound variables. No, they're activity parameters. They're activity parameters. So A is correct. This is kind of a terminology question. All right, number 26 or 25. During the test phase, what allows the team to confirm that the RPA process is running correctly? Okay, so a team at NTO develops an RPA process that will be invoked from a Mule application. What allows the team to confirm that the RPA process is running correctly? All right, well, let's take a look. Create an invocable test plan and call the RPA process from a REST client. Well, it's in the test phase. You can't do that in the test phase. So this one is not correct. Invocable test plan call, nope, that one is not correct either. Create a test plan specifying the activity parameters and viewing the output information in the process run results. No, that is not correct. This one is correct in that you can create a test plan specifying the activity parameters, because we can modify the activity parameters. If you remember, when we created a test plan, we're able to change those activity parameters with different values. And then you can see if the test passed based on the logs and the details in the logs. Okay. But these other 3 options are not possible. Okay. Or at least these 2 are not. This one, there is not a process run, as far as the output information. So in regards to the correct answer, we're looking at A. All right. Number 26. According to best practices, how should the image search action step be configured? Image search. Okay. So using the image search action step, Anyline Airlines develops an RPA process that manually interacts with a web page. Okay. And so this is like the OCR, the AI OCR. And so it's asking, how should the image search action be configured? Use percentage required to 70%, set a search area to full screen. And, when we ran across issues with the AI OCR, we did do that. But know that what is actually recommended is a small unique pattern area to decrease the runtime. So A is the correct answer. But when we ran across errors and issues, we did do the full screen. So again, A is the correct answer, even though that this is what we did to bypass those issues that some of the screen resolutions were having. So it would be, the correct answer is to use a small unique pattern area so that it decreases the runtime. All right, number 27. When creating a production configuration, which 2 settings must be specified? Okay, so now the bot is being deployed to production. And it uses a scheduled RPA process to extract data from a legacy system that will populate fields in a form. They want a user to review the form before submitting it. Okay, so they want the user to review the form before submitting it. So what is necessary? Choose 2. Choose 2. Okay, so as this is coming in, 2 things need to happen. All right. One of them, well, let's start down here. Initial activity parameter values. Okay, so that actually is going to not matter for an initial activity parameter value. The information is going to be coming from the bot, and the activity parameter values will be used to pull the values and put them into the field form. So that is not a correct answer for initial activity parameter values. Process deployment region is not relevant at all. Deployable RPA bot is needed, and also process trigger execution is needed as well. So correct answer A and B is accurate. A and B is accurate. All right, 28. We're almost done with this section. 28. An RPA process is scheduled to run every 10 minutes. What happens if an error or an exception occurs? Okay, let's see. It keeps attempting to execute the process until it's complete. No, it does not do that. Now, you can have some logic that does do some type of it depends on what your bot is doing. Execution pauses and waits for user to take action. No, it's just going to fail. When we do the test and it fails, it tells you that it fails. Okay. It keeps executing until successful. No, that is not true. What does happen is A. It does execute. The process execution does terminate. It stops. And then it'll run again the next 10 minutes. So this is the correct behavior right there. Okay. And sometimes I think the practice exam questions are just really good to help you think about things that we may not have really even discussed. We've seen some of the behavior of some of that, but I think it's just good to get a focus on that. All right. So next up, question 29. When creating an alert target, what mechanism should they use to notify employees when an alert rule is triggered? Okay, so this is going to be when a bot, the airline wants to respond quickly if a bot changes to the stop state. Okay, so if a bot does stop. And when creating an alert target, what mechanism should they use when that is triggered? And the answer is an email template. Okay, it's actually an email template. It's not any of these. It is an email template. That's what you should use. Okay, and I don't think we even covered that in the material, but that is what you would use, email template. All right, so section 4. And again, I'm going to pause this to keep us into so the recordings keep with the sections. So see you on the next one.